It's Thursday, July 17th. I'm Matt Harmon. Welcome to the Yahoo Fantasy Forecast, and it is a hell of a day to talk ball. And joining me to do just that is Justin Boone. Boone, what's going on, buddy?
Hey, I'm doing really well. I got out to a cabin with some friends on the weekend, got a little burn on the face, got some mosquito bites, some black fly bites to deal with. But this is such an awesome time of year, right? We got training camps, we got some teams already going at it. Rest of the teams are going to show up soon. And I got right back to it this week with my breakout series. I did quarterbacks and running backs already. And that's kind of a funny thing here. And I wrote about it in the article that normally I wouldn't talk about rookies in the breakout article. But with running backs this year, there's really not that many non-rookies that you can consider good breakout candidates. So I ended up mentioning a couple, and we didn't know when I had set on that, we had set on the time for today and doing this and the topic and everything, that they were going to completely contradict that I was going to say nice things about these rookie backs in that article. And now today we're going to see if we can do a little bit of the opposite and poke some holes. So I'm up for it. I'm ready for the challenge.
Yeah, as Justin's alluding to here, this is our final episode of Contrarian Corner. It's also kind of like basically our last off-season-y type of show because, like you mentioned, buddy, training camps are opening up fully next week. Some teams are already in camp, which every notification of like, hey, this team is reporting to camp. The kickoff is 50 days away. I feel like I'm just getting, slapped left and right with just how quickly this is all approaching here. But for our last topic of Contrarian Corner, we're going to look at the rookie running back class. And as Boone mentioned, there's a lot to get excited about with this class. There's a lot of potential breakouts. I mean, if you followed the show all off season or you just straight up paid attention to the NFL draft, there's a really good running back class. Some compared it to that famed running back class from 2017 where we had impact players all throughout. Shoot, even in the 7th round, Chris Carson of that year gave us a few moments with the Seattle Seahawks. And, there might be some guys to come out of this class that really make a big impact. But today, we're not going to talk about how things can go right. We're going to talk about how things can go wrong and ask, what if the rookie running back class is overhyped? Because when I look at the landscape, Boone, like you said, if this class doesn't deliver, I do think fantasy managers who are kind of counting on some real big, breakouts or obviously just really strong rookie seasons are going to be left a little bit banged if that comes to pass.
Yeah, whether you're looking at dynasty leagues like dynasty startups and whatnot, where the rookies are going there, the running backs are dominating the first round in those of rookie drafts. And then in redraft leagues too, we see every single season these guys get pushed up higher and higher as people realize that rookies tend to be pretty good values normally in those drafts if you can hit on the right ones. So let's see if we can poke some holes and maybe tell some people some of these reasons why it might not work out, even though we're going to start off with some of the guys where it's pretty tough to do that, but we're going to give it our best shot.
Again, like we did with Josh Norris on the quarterback show, the second-year quarterback show earlier this week. Generally, I'm pretty optimistic about most of these players. But again, it's important to paint for the listener like, hey, how can this go wrong? And sort of take that risk reward here. And let's get our harpoons out here and try to spear a big fish on this first one, because we're going to talk in ADP order of where these running backs are in consensus ADP right now, which brings us to Ashton Jeanty, the rookie running back of the Las Vegas Raiders, who is running back 4 in consensus ADP right now. And he's like the 9th overall pick. He is a clear-cut first-round pick. So all the people who hate, he never played it down in the NFL, you're not taking Ashton Jeanty in the first round. But a lot of people are, Boone. And I'm curious, how do we think that this can go wrong? And is there anything that gives you pause about taking Ashton Jeanty as the 4th running back in fantasy drafts right now?
Well, I'll say off the top, I don't think he's on the same level of some of like the really elite running back prospects like Bijan Robinson or Saquon Barkley. I think he's like just a little bit below those guys.
Sure.
But still, where he went, the team, the volume he's going to get, I definitely think he deserves to be a first round pick. But if we're going to try to poke holes in it, I would start by saying, is he like a bit of a stat merchant, right? Like he went to Boise State. Did he face a weaker level of competition? And you look at it, like he led all of college football with almost 2,000 rushing yards after contact. The second guy in that category, we're going to talk about him a little bit later, is Omarion Hampton. And he was like 700 yards behind him. Like, that's how much difference there was. On that same note, I mean, Jeanty led in missed tackles forced as well. And again, the second place guy is Hampton, and he had almost 50 fewer. So you wonder, like, was the competition just not up to par with what some of the other guys were facing potentially? And are we overrating him based on like those really inflated stats that he had coming in?
Okay, let me just say, you kind of came into this exercise with a little bit of like hesitancy. I don't really want to poke too many holes in these guys. And then you come in with like the perfect, social media out of context quote graphic, like Ashton Jeanty, is he a stat merchant? I mean, that was perfect.
I can't wait for the hate that I'm going to get. Yeah, no one's going to see the context of me going, oh, Jeanty's going to be good. It's just going to be that. Yeah.
It's like, is he a stat merchant? We're just asking questions here. Okay. We're just asking questions. But no, I think that starting this off from a talent perspective with Jeanty is important, because I actually think that from the stat perspective, I don't really have too many questions about him as a player. He's got his big back with balance. Really love just how low compact he is and just how he sets things up really well. I don't have too many questions about him as a player, but he's coming off an immense amount of workload. Like, you don't do all that from a statistical perspective without touching the football a ton. And we just talked about this last week about Saquon Barkley and all of those touches that he assumed. It would be kind of disingenuous to not, just because we didn't see him do this in the NFL, Ashton Jeanty, to not say like, hey, he's coming off a season in college football where he touched the football a ton. And unlike Saquon Barkley, doesn't just walk into the offseason. He's got to train for the draft. And I know he didn't do any of the on-field workouts or any of that stuff at the NFL scouting combine, so maybe that doesn't matter. But nevertheless, like, it's not as if he just walked into a normal offseason after that. So that's certainly something to consider from an individual perspective. Like I said, I do think, Boone, it would be disingenuous to not bring that up if we're also going to talk about that with Saquon Barkley.
And we've seen other highly drafted running backs come in that have these monster workloads in college and have these like video game numbers and did not work out in the NFL. Like, it's not like it would be the first time that happened. So if we're going to lawyer it, that's the first spot that I would start. The next one would be, this isn't necessarily the best scenario to land in going to the Raiders, right? Like, I would argue that Bijan Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs, other first round talents that have come in recently at the running back position, they at least had good offensive lines that they were joining the teams on. Like, right? Like, the Raiders offensive line, they're certainly bottom third in the league. I might be a little bit generous there as well, right? They ranked 22nd in run block win rate, 21st in running back yards before contact per rush. Those are according to Pro Football Focus. And they didn't really make a ton of changes either. They brought in Alex Kappa at right guard. He was graded out as one of the worst guards in the league last year, and he's potentially going to start for them this season. So you go to a team like the Raiders where we've seen lots of problems, lots of dysfunction in the past, and this definitely could be a losing team. I think they're the worst team in their division. I think right now they're around 7.5 for projected win total. So is this really the best scenario for a running back to go into? And I'm sure you've looked at this before, Matt, like, running backs on losing teams, it's not necessarily where you want to place your chips in fantasy.
Yeah, I was just going to bring that up. We had Josh Norris on the show earlier this week, and he and Hayden just did a pretty good show about like where these players finish in terms of top running backs, where their teams finish in points per game. And if you look at like the outlier guys, it's usually the Kamara types. Last year, it was a top 20 running back in points per game. The Saints ranked 23rd in scoring. Devon Achane 22nd in scoring. Those guys catch a lot of passes. Like, is Ashton Jeanty going to catch a lot of passes? And I think that's one part of it. And secondly, how many points do we think the Raiders are going to score this year? That I think is worth asking, because I think that getting Geno Smith as the quarterback probably ensures some level of competency, right? Like, I don't think this is going to be one of the worst offenses in the NFL like it was last year. And, this is different than last year, one of the worst offenses in the NFL. Brock Bowers is still the tight end one, and he runs away with it, because being a pass catcher in one of those offenses is a little bit different than a running back, where, especially in half PPR formats, as the Yahoo standard is, you do need to score some touchdowns here. Like, how many touchdowns are the Raiders going to be scoring this year? I think that Geno Smith allows them to not, again, like the bottom won't fall out or anything, but we are looking at the depth chart right now, and Jacoby Myers is a really good player, underrated. But are they counting on like Trey Tucker or fourth-round pick Dante Thornton to start at the outside receiver position? Jack Besh, I really liked as a prospect, but he is a rookie wide receiver. How's he going to fit into things here? It's just not like on paper the most dangerous offense, and I think they are going to try to run the ball a ton. I'm sure you have repeated the stats. I know I've done it a ton of Chip Kelly's like overall rush attempts when he was the Eagles head coach, and that even at Ohio State last year, this was a very tight end centric, heavy personnel, kind of, bigger offense that really wanted to establish the run with two running backs we're going to be talking about later here. But still, again, like the defense on the other side of it, the secondary is a mess. Like, how many game scripts are they going to be in where they're just pounding the rock? So I think those are two like ecosystem questions we have to ask. Can the Raiders establish the run like they want to and be in those type of game scripts? And just overall, where do we think this team is going to rank in total points scored per game this year?
And on that front, like when you have a new coaching staff coming in that you think might be an upgrade, let's look at like the Panthers last year with Dave Canales showing up, right? You thought, okay, this is great for them. But how long did it really take them to kind of get all on the same page? It wasn't until the second half of the season when Bryce Young really started to come on, and all of a sudden you saw some signs of life from that team. And you look at the Raiders, right? This offseason, I mean, from Tom Brady joining the ownership to the new coaching staff with Pete Carroll and Chip Kelly there at OC, and a new quarterback, like you mentioned, a new running back, a bunch of new pieces on defense. Even if it all works out, it might take a little while for them to gel and for it all to come together. And could things kind of get started off on a bad front there for Jeanty? And might he end up even being like somebody that you want to trade for midway through the season or after the first month if the Raiders are kind of struggling and people aren't really liking what they're seeing there? He could be a guy that maybe in the second half of the season, they finally find their way and start to put up the really big numbers that you would hope that he eventually puts up.
No, that's a great point. It could be like a slow September for this team. As we do this all the time in the offseason. We think like, all right, hey, all this new stuff, it's all going to come together really quickly. It doesn't work like that, right? I mean, it just does not. So that's a really good point that I hadn't even considered. This might take a little bit of time. I'm just looking at the Raiders' early season schedule right now. They start at week 1 in New England, Chargers week 2 in Washington in week 3, Chicago in week 4. That's their September schedule. Kind of mixed. I think they'd obviously, how many of those games do we think they're realistically going to be favored in, though? I could see them being like the underdog in all 4 of those teams, with them going to New England in week 1.
Well, last week on the show, I talked a bunch about my fantasy strength of schedule matrix. If you look at the Raiders running backs, they have the 10th toughest schedule this year. So it's not the end of the world. Like I mentioned last week, you want to look at the extremes of that chart, the teams that are all the way in red, teams that are all the way in dark green. 10th isn't the worst, but it at least means that there's not going to be some like golden path for him where he just has one of the easiest schedules and that's going to really be the wind behind him, kind of aiding him. The schedule probably not doing him any favors overall for the whole season.
I think the more that we talk about this, the more there actually are maybe more negative variables in the Ashton Jeanty equation than maybe it just looks on paper, right? I mean,
or maybe we're just really good at this.
I don't think
give
that's
us some
the answer.
credit here. We're digging deep
really
on
good,
this one.
We are really good contrarians. Maybe that is just the answer, but I don't know. Like, again, I think this is an important conversation to have because I'm not going to speak for you, Boone, but I certainly was not doing this exercise with a guy like Marvin Harrison last year. And look, he was over. I don't know where you were on Harrison last year, but I remember the night of the draft and just like the fallout afterwards. To me, it was like, okay, I don't know if I really want to just immediately start ranking him at his ceiling and like just make him a top 12 wide receiver in his rookie season or anything. But by the time we got to August, I did get myself there and I did end up ranking him there. And at least in one draft last year, I did end up taking him way too high. And that team really struggled throughout the course of the season. So And I sat there and just like, hey, this is a great prospect. He's walking into a situation where there is a huge vacancy at the number one receiver position, and I'm pretty optimistic this offense can take a step forward. And like, yeah, he was the number one wide receiver, but he wasn't really the number one target. And this offense did take a step forward, but not in the way that, I sort of imagined it. And some of the things I even like told myself a story about, hey, Michael Wilson can be a guy that takes X receiver reps, and that's going to help Marvin Harrison Jr. kind of be deployed around the formation. And that like quite literally did not happen at all last season. So like, I think this is worthwhile to point out some of these negative variables, because I did not do it with a guy that, similarly like a rookie that went in the first round last year. And it's different at receiver and running back. I think obviously the learning curve is a little bit smoother at the running back position, but we're going to ask for all of these guys, like, what is the fallout in fantasy if it does go wrong? For Jeanty, it's pretty easy. Like, the fallout isn't, okay, if it doesn't work out for Jeanty, well, then Raheem Mostert is a real big value in fantasy football. It's just, no, if this goes wrong for Ashton Jeanty, like the people that end up taking him in the first round, because I think we can point out all these discussions and like he's still going to go in the first round, you're probably not going to have a very fun fantasy season. And you're going to look, all of the people in your league are going to point at you and be like, yeah, dumbass, you took a rookie in the first round. Like, what did you expect?
Yeah, I think the thing we can fall back on, not to be too positive here, is the volume. And you kind of mentioned it there. Who else is getting touches, right? Like, Mostert's going to be 33 years old this year, I believe. Like, he's not that guy. The guys that they have behind him, like Zamir White and Sincere McCormick, like, I don't really think any of them are going to be that guy that could step up. So if this doesn't work out for Jeanty, it is probably going to be based on talent and not volume. And if it doesn't work out in real life, people are going to lose their jobs. Like, that organization is going to be bad news. And that's why it just seems so crazy when you really boil it down to, how do you take a running back that early when your franchise is at this point? Like, they are not a running back away. This is not the Philadelphia Eagles going out and getting Saquon Barkley and adding that last piece. This is a team that just invested big time draft capital in a running back in hopes that he can be that thing that powers their entire offense and really gives the whole organization like a new identity. And it better work out, because if it doesn't, fantasy wise and real life, it is going to be trouble for everybody involved.
I'm going to make an absolutely disgusting comparison that,
don't say Trent
sounds
Richardson.
Gross. Yeah, that's exactly what I'm about to say. Like, it's a disgusting comparison, but it actually should give you some hope if even all of these negative things come to pass. Like, it actually can still work out for Ashton Jeanty as a, first round pick in fantasy football, like a top 10 running back. Trent Richardson in 2012, like, let's just be clear. Trent Richardson turned out to not be the player that everybody hoped he is. So let's live in this pretend world where Ashton Jeanty is not the player that everybody hopes he is. He averaged 3.6 yards per carry. He played on an offense in the Cleveland Browns that ranked 24th in points per game in 2012. I think the Raiders could realistically finish 24th in points scored per game, and that would be an improvement on where they were last year. I think they might be a little bit better than that, but still, they could finish in that range. And he was the running back 8 in fantasy points that year because he caught 50 passes and he scored 11 touchdowns because he carried the ball 267 times that year, which at that point, because the league was just different then, that was 11th among running backs in carries. Like, I do think that Jeanty can do a lot of that, could end up having a pretty similar season, and that would certainly bring up questions in the Raiders organization. But for our selfish fantasy purposes, that actually would be kind of it wouldn't be a win if you took him as the 4th running back. He finishes as the 8th, but it's a small loss, if anything.
Yeah, volume is king, and barring injury, he is going to get the volume. The volume will be there. Will everything else be there to help him reach the heights that all the fantasy managers hope that he can reach and that he's being drafted at, certainly? I think he's going to be okay, but there's definitely, I think we've done a good job here of pointing out some reasons why people might want to think twice or just maybe bump him down a spot or two in their rankings.
Yeah, maybe just I might bump him down below Derrick Henry just because, like, I realize there's an age risk for Derrick Henry, but what else is the risk with Derrick Henry. But that's it though. At the running back position, like there's not that many other appealing candidates to bump him over, in my opinion. Let's try to exercise like the demons of what we just discussed with Trent Richardson and move on to our next running back here, which is Omarion Hampton, who was the other running back drafted in the first round this year. He is the running back 17 overall, 46th overall pick. By the way, Boone and everybody listening, that's gonna go up. I think that is headed in an upward direction based on everything that's been going on with Najee Harris, who, if you have been unplugged, suffered a mysterious injury, I guess I'd want to call it, on 4th of July in a fireworks accident. So he's starting camp on the NFI, the non-football injury/illness list. We don't know when he's going to take the practice field, and that gives a lot of time for Omarion Hampton to take reps with the first team and just widen that gap between those guys this year. So I think by the time we get to real deal redraft season in August, I think Hampton's going to be going higher than running back 17. So I just said a lot of positive things in terms of his new opportunity with Harris on the shelf, but how can it go wrong, and what gives us pause in terms of ranking Omarion Hampton this year?
Yeah, you took all the positive things, and now I get to be the bad guy here. First off, let's say Najee, we're wishing him the best, right? We want to see him back on the field. As much as I think sometimes fantasy managers, get excited about a player, and then if another guy on that depth chart gets hurt, it's kind of hard not to be like, oh man, this is going to open the door for that guy. You still want to see Najee back on the field. You want to see him healthy. And he's a guy, that's the weirdest part of all this, hasn't missed a game in his career, right? He's played 17 games every single season in all of his 4 years. He's also a guy that's been productive. I know like the fantasy community gets down on him, and sometimes there's these running backs and people don't remember it now probably. When you think about David Montgomery, you think about Josh Jacobs, these were guys that were kind of like stack-compilers for a while. They weren't having those really big fantasy seasons. And because it seemed like they didn't have that elite production in their bag, I think people were really down on them, and then they go to different teams and all of a sudden they explode and they have these really good fantasy seasons, and now people view them differently. I bring that up because Najee's going to a different place now where his skill set as a north-south runner, that fits really well in Greg Roman's scheme. And if you look at what Najee's done, even with all the stuff that went on with the Steelers and Jaylen Warren being there, Najee's still over 1,200 yards from scrimmage every single season. Like, he was getting it done to a certain degree. He just didn't have that big fantasy ceiling. And that's why people, I think, look at him and aren't that excited to draft him and aren't that excited to have him on their teams year after year. But the Chargers last year, they put up really good numbers in fantasy from the running back position. J.K. Dobbins, Gus Edwards, who couldn't stay healthy. That was the knock on them, right? I mean, Gus Edwards, little washed, let's face it. But between those two guys, they had 8 top 15 fantasy finishes, weekly fantasy finishes last season. That's pretty good when you think about those backs. Before Dobbins got hurt, he was the RB 14 in fantasy points per game, and then the injuries kind of derailed the rest of his season. But there's value to be had in this backfield. I think it's going to go to Hampton. Is there a scenario where this issue with the fireworks, this injury, they're saying it's not going to keep him out long? Like you mentioned, he's going to be on the NFI list to start. Is there a scenario where he still gets there in a week or two? He practices, he wins the trust of the coaching staff because he's that kind of back where coaches are going to like him. He's going to do things properly. Maybe Hampton makes a couple rookie mistakes out there, and all of a sudden Najee has this really solid role in an offense that we know can produce, and it ends up being more of a committee backfield that potentially favors Harris. Yes. Do I think that's going to happen? Absolutely not. And I kind of hate you for making me do this because Hampton, I will say, is probably one of my favorite players to draft this year in Dynasty, in redraft. Like, so excited about him. Certainly think he's going to be somebody that as the year goes along, and maybe right from week 1, just leads people to fantasy titles because he has all the tools. They drafted him in the first round for a reason. He also fits this scheme for Greg Roman. Like, he's that kind of guy. You could question like the lateral agility a little bit, but he can be that like north-south, hit it and go. And he's kind of like a souped up version of Najee. Like, I think he can do a lot more than Najee can. And I think that's going to be evident from the get-go. And Jim Harbaugh too, this offseason, they just gush about Hampton, right? He referred to him as a 4-down back. I'm still not entirely sure what that is, but they referred to him as a 4-down back. That tells you they really like this guy. The draft capital was there. He is going to be the guy, but Harris is somebody that could be a little bit annoying and could be a bit of a problem, especially at the start of the season. If Harris is healthy, maybe he eats into that workload a little more than fantasy managers want.
Yeah, I think, look, if you draft Omarion Hampton, you're just going to have to fortify yourself, guard your heart against the fact that Najee Harris is going to annoy you at times this year. I think the scenario that you painted there in terms of Harris wins the trust in camp, and especially like early season, I think there's some level of veteran deference goes to the guy in Najee Harris who's been in the league, been around the block. I think the odds of I think that is still possible. I think the odds of it happening are lower now, just with the reality of what is going on with Najee Harris after this 4th of July fireworks incident. So the early season schedule again, just in September for the Los Angeles Chargers. Kansas City in week 1, believe that is the YouTube game. Then they've got, they're in Las Vegas against the Raiders in week 2, Broncos week 3 in New York to face the Giants in week 4. There's going to be some tougher games in there, Kansas City, Denver, but Raiders, Giants, I think those teams have good defensive lines. We don't quite know where those teams will rank out in terms of defense, but if Najee Harris does get back into camp quickly and does start, earning the trust, and he's the nominal starter, gets more touches in the first 4 weeks, that wouldn't be too surprising. And then the schedule does kind of lighten up from there in terms of the overall defenses that they're going to go against. So I think Hampton, is somebody I agree with you. I really like this year. I think I do want to draft a ton of. And frankly, like right now, it's really difficult to paint that picture of how it can go wrong, especially because you bring up like this was a fruitful backfield for fantasy last year, and this run game wasn't even good, man. Like from a success rate standpoint, they were one of the worst run games last year. I think they were 27th in rushing success rate, and I think that when they signed Najee, they just wanted to get that like, hey, if there's 4 yards there that's blocked, we're gonna get 4 yards. I think how it can actually go wrong for Hampton is just like we're wrong on the talent evaluation, and he is a guy who is a little bit more boom bust. Matt Waldman's actually questioned his ability to be like a true gap scheme runner like this team wants to be under Greg Roman. So I think for Hampton, how it can go wrong is that we miss on the talent evaluation. But I'm with you that I really like this player, and I do think there's a lot more good than bad with him as a running back.
And the line should be better as well, right? They go and get Mekhi Becton to slot into the right guard spot. They have 3 first-rounders on that line already, one of the best tackle duos in the league. So could the blocking be even better this season? I think so. I mean, I don't know. I have so much belief in Hampton that it's really hard for me to be down on him, because even if this does end up being some sort of split with him and Najee, like, you look at another first round back, I mentioned him earlier, but Jahmyr Gibbs, right? In 2023, in his rookie season, he shared that Lions backfield. He only played 56% of the snaps. He finished as the RB11 in fantasy points per game. And it was maybe a bit of a slow start to the year, but he got going.
Totally.
So again, I don't see the downside here. Maybe you could say like Hampton, a bit of, his running style, like could he take a lot of punishment? Could he get hurt? We could say that about any running back. And this is a guy that's 22 years old. So I think he's going to be okay. I think he's going to be a pretty good fantasy pick for everybody that grabs him.
Chargers were 10th in points per game last year. I think this offense is going to be better in year 2 under Greg Roman, Jim Harbaugh. And hopefully Trey Harris gets into training camp too, because I think he can be a part of lifting the lid and adding more verticality to the pass game. Fallout if it goes wrong for Omarion Hampton, I guess, Boone, is just that people that draft Najee Harris outside the top 100 picks, like you might get yourself a nice little value running back there. That really, to me, like from a fallout perspective, is what would happen.
Yeah, that they would flip and that Najee ends up being like a low end RB2, kind of like he always is. And then Hampton ends up being more of that RB3 flex. I still think they would both be pretty good options, but you'd be disappointed for sure if you took Hampton where he's going now and that's all he ends up giving you for the season. I would also say if you want to go like really, really deep dive here, Raheem Sanders is somebody that you look at this backfield and we're talking about it like one that we really want to invest in, but what if something goes wrong? who's the number 3 running back in that backfield? I don't think Kamani Vidal is the guy, even though everybody, including myself, hyped him up last year as a potential guy that could step in. We knew the injuries were going to come for those veteran backs. They really just didn't have anyone else step up when they happened. You look at, Hassan Haskins. He's more of a special teamer. Like, he's not really going to end up being that guy. So Raheem Sanders is another rookie back. Doesn't come with, nearly as high credentials as Hampton does. But I think he's somebody that could end up being that number 3 back. If some injuries strike, maybe he could step up. And we're just talking about like a very deep dynasty stash. But I'm going to throw that out there because I have him on a bunch of taxi squads just in case. And for the very reason that we were just saying, this is a productive backfield. I think regardless of who's in there, they're going to have an opportunity to put up decent fantasy stats. So a couple injuries happen. Maybe Sanders could give you something later this year.
What a sicko. And I say that within like endearingly. I wonder how many other fantasy podcasts in the middle of friggin' July are talking about Raheem Sanders. I would put the odds at like 0. I mean, there's got to be none. Okay, next guy here, a little bit more higher pedigree than Raheem Sanders. The third rookie running back going off the board right now is Patriots rookie running back TreVeyon Henderson, running back 21, 56th overall. Boone, how can it go wrong? And is there anything that gives you pause about Henderson's outlook as a rookie this year?
I think this is the first one where we start to go, okay, I could realistically see some paths for this to go wrong. I mean, Josh McDaniels is involved in this now, right? He's been a part of some absolute dumpster fires in the NFL. So I think maybe those happened when he was a head coach and not necessarily a coordinator, but still, he has been a part of some things just completely going off the rails. So he's there now. A little bit of a concern, perhaps. We look down to some other things. The offensive line is just so brutal in New England, like bottom 5 unit in the league, I would say. Definitely not ideal for a young running back to have to start behind that. But the big thing, of course, is Ramondre Stevenson. And how does this team view him? How does the new coaching staff view him? Are they going to put him out there as the veteran guy and use Henderson as the change of pace? Or is Henderson just going to blow him out of the water because he is the more explosive back? He's the more dynamic back. Stevenson had fumbling issues in the past. Stevenson just doesn't have that next gear to really break a game open. So I think there's a reason why they took Henderson where they did. This is overall like a pretty slow offense, and they kind of need Henderson out there to bring that speed and to give them a little bit of something. But there's definitely concern that Ramondre Stevenson is a pretty good back. We talk about Ashton Jeanty not really having anyone. You look at Henderson, I know, he didn't go that much further behind Hampton, but didn't get that first round draft capital, went a little bit later. And now he's got this guy in Stevenson that might fit what the new coaching staff and Mike Vrabel kind of like. Like, it could Stevenson be that bigger back, and then they just sprinkle in Henderson and try to get some big plays and try to get some, game breaking things out of him. It's possible. Again, I don't think that's going to happen. We shouldn't say that every single time here, but I don't think that's going to be the case. Still, I think it's more of a possibility maybe in this Patriots backfield.
I think it's a very real possibility. Ramondre Stevenson as a rookie in 2021 with Josh McDaniels as the offensive coordinator, because that's how McDaniels' career has gone. He leaves New England, goes poorly, comes back home, leaves New England, comes back home. He had 4.6 yards per carry that year, just over 600 total yards, touched the ball 147 times. Like, he was pretty useful back, and he's obviously had a really good second season there in New England once McDaniels was in Las Vegas with the Raiders. But yeah, there's some familiarity here, and obviously, it's more Mike Vrabel's show now than ever before, of course, but this front office still gave him a contract extension last offseason. Like, I do think that this ADP implies a little bit that Ramondre is just going to be thrown to like the shelf here. He's going off the board 117th overall. I actually really like taking Ramondre Stevenson in the double-digit rounds, especially when I haven't built up a lot of running backs early, because I think there's how it can go wrong is, and I think this is our first one, like you said, where there really could be some issues here. I think there's a chance that Ramondre Stevenson leads this team in carries. Henderson can catch a lot of passes, but I think you're really banking on him being a really high volume pass catcher, because again, how many touchdowns is Henderson going to score as the guy that may or may not be the goal line back. That might still end up being Ramondre Stevenson, gets the touches down inside the 10-yard line. And really, like, I think the Patriots offense is going to be better. No question. It can't be much worse than it was last year. This was a terrible offense. They were 30th in points per game. But how many touchdowns are the Patriots going to score? How much better is this team going to be in 2025 than they were last year? Again, I think certainly better. But like we talked about on the last episode, the weapons are definitely improved, but not great. And the offensive line might be going from unspeakably bad to just regular bad here in Drake May's second season.
Yeah, I really agree with you there that I think there is a good chance that Stevenson could lead them in carries by a little bit, not by a lot, but maybe get the slight edge there. And we're not drafting Henderson for, a huge touchdown total. If you put that up, great. I think you're drafting him because he is going to have a role in the passing game. He's really good in pass pro too. So that thing that often rookie backs, will lose playing time because they can't figure that out. He is going to be fine in that area. So it's not something that's going to pull him off the field. And the Patriots, they're going to be trailing a bunch. So the guy who's a really dangerous passing weapon out of the backfield should be out there, I would think, versus Ramondre Stevenson. So Henderson's going to get a lot of playing time. I think that's where his fantasy ranking comes from, the belief that he's going to get so much work in the receiving game that's going to lift him up and lift up his value. I don't know. Like, I don't want to be too positive about him here, so we'll keep going negative. He's a smaller back, so is that a thing, right? He's around 200 pounds. A lot of guys around that 200-pound mark. I think about so many of those 49ers running backs over the years, like Matt Breida, that popped up and had really good stretches for fantasy, but weren't able to consistently do it and continue to put up decent numbers. Again, there's been guys that have been around 200 pounds that have had great fantasy seasons too. We're just trying to look for things to potentially poke holes in this. And I think Drake May overall seems to be an elevator of talent. And I think he's going to figure it out very quickly that giving Henderson the ball makes his life very easy and that he actually doesn't have to do much. He could just give him the ball and let him do the work. And I think that's what this offense needs. They need that guy that can create on his own, that can make some big plays, that can get into the second level. And Henderson is that guy. Stevenson is going to get what's blocked for him. Stevenson's going to be that grinder. And like you said, he's not going away, but how much of a thorn in Henderson's side is he going to be? He's probably going to be involved quite a bit. And yet I still think Henderson can live up to this ADP by, getting so much involvement in the passing game.
Yeah, I think maybe he could live up to the ADP, but I think the paths to him really crushing it are probably, like, those are pretty narrow, I guess is the way I look at it with him. And if that happens, if it goes wrong in that way, then I do think Stevenson would be a value. Just last point in favor of Henderson before we throw to break. Henderson fumbled twice in his first 2 seasons in college, never fumbled after that. He's actually never lost a fumble in college. And of course, Ramondre has gotten himself in Bill Belichick's doghouse previously by being a fumbler. Got himself, in trouble at times last year's coaching staff, with being a little bit of a fumbler there. So that is something. I don't find Henderson's ADP like offensive at running back 21 or 57, but I will say in drafts that I've been in so far, he's not somebody that I've been like really itching to click there. There's just always somebody that likes him a little bit more than me. And I think, again, it comes down for me to just seeing the paths to him really crushing this ADP being a little bit more narrow than maybe than it might seem at first glance. But we're going to take our first break. When we come back, we have a bunch of more rookie running backs to discuss right after this. All right, we are back continuing our Contrarian Corner discussion of this year's really, really good rookie running back class. Kind of not enjoying poking holes in some of these players, but let's keep it moving to a guy in RJ Harvey, who is the running back 23 in ADP right now, 59th overall. Boone, he was the guy that people were really excited about as a sleeper in this class, and then Sean Payton comes out and says, no, I'm actually the most excited about RJ Harvey, and takes him in the second round. I know people have been buzzing about Harvey basically all summer as a fantasy selection, but how can it go wrong, and what gives us pause with his 2025 outlook?
The arrival of J.K. Dobbins isn't nothing, right? J.K. Dobbins, apparently they were talking to him for a while. Apparently they planned to bring him in for a while. So was this always in the cards that this was going to be Dobbins and Harvey together? Seems like it. And like we mentioned before, Dobbins, he's still a decent back. The main issue with him is that he's not going to stay healthy. I don't like to call anyone injury prone, but I think we can look at the sample size now and say the odds of J.K. Dobbins staying healthy for even 14 or 15 games seems very, very unlikely. So you're going to get him for a stretch of the season. He can be a good starting back during that time, but he's not going to be the answer for you long-term at the running back position. So this is going to end up being some sort of committee. Who takes the lead? Who gets more work? Kind of like we talked about with Henderson and Stevenson with the Patriots. Are we going to see Dobbins be that veteran guy? Is he just an upgrade on the other backs that they had in the backfield? They wanted some veteran presence that they could trust back there, because other than that, it's Audric Estime and Jaleel McLaughlin and guys that you don't necessarily have complete faith that they can step up. And, in the case that Harvey falters, in the case that Harvey misses time, do you really want those guys in there? We saw how that worked out last year. Everybody in the Broncos backfield got a shot and nobody really put up big numbers, despite the fact that this was a pretty productive backfield. Like Sean Payton backfields are pretty good for fantasy normally. So there's a chance that Harvey and Dobbins could both put up decent stats here. Now, the thing that worries me most is there's been some talk that Harvey's pass protection is an issue and that's why they wanted a veteran back. And I mentioned earlier, like, this is something that when we're excited about these rookie backs coming in, this is something that people don't talk about enough that actually ends up keeping them off the field and ends up really sewering their fantasy value sometimes. Is that going to happen with Harvey? Probably not entirely. But the fact that Dobbins showed up, to me, made me bump Harvey down a few spots. I still have him above Dobbins, of course, but I'm looking at them now like Harvey has that chance to be the low-end RB2. I think I have him ranked right on that borderline right now, with Dobbins more in the RB3 range. But there's going to be value to both these guys. And Scott Fishbowl this week, I took Dobbins in the 12th round. He went off the board as like the 45th running back or something. That's great value to me, even though I still think Harvey is going to be the more valuable of the two backs there.
Yeah, I totally agree that obviously I think Harvey is going to end up being the better value. And, not to mention that, as you said, like we don't draft fantasy teams to win week one and have the coolest looking lineup in week one or after the draft. Like, hey, look at my screenshot of my team. And like everybody just is fawning all over it. You draft a team to win the championship. And yeah, let me tell you what, like I love J.K. Dobbins. I think he played well last year. Even like if I said that running game wasn't always consistent, it was awesome to see him just come back and ripping off long runs in week one. I think he's a good player, but he's had injury issues. Like, who's to say that by November, like RJ Harvey, this starts out as a committee, but then by November, December, like the weeks that really matter for fantasy, like he's the guy. Like that's very well possible. Dobbins, I do think, is a pretty nice pick at running back 39 overall ADP right now, because I mentioned it, like this is a backfield that last year just nobody stepped up, but it was a really good rushing ecosystem. They were 11th in yards before contact per rush last year, and were bottom 10 in running back rush yards after contact. Like that takes away even like Bo Nix's stuff. Like this was a good situation for a running back last year, and nobody stepped up, which, by the way, is why they add J.K. Dobbins, because like you don't just take Javonte Williams out of here and now we're all good. Like, no, those other guys, McLaughlin and old Audric Estime back there, probably not really moving the needle. So I think that RJ Harvey, the way it goes wrong is, the pass protection does not allow him to be a factor as a pass catcher, because I think he could be really dangerous on like these screen plays and sort of the designed stuff that Sean Payton wants to do from a running back position. But the pass protection, that might end up like negating some of that work. And again, just like Dobbins ends up getting a lot of veteran deference early, and he just takes the job and runs with it, which I think is possible in this rushing ecosystem right here.
Yeah, and if we want to like paint a scenario, let's paint a scenario where Harvey earns their trust. He gets out there and then he blows a pass protection, assignment, and all of a sudden Bo Nix is on the ground writhing in pain, and the next thing you know, Harvey's not on the field as much. Like that is totally possible. And if that kind of thing happens, then you start to look at it and you go, okay, he's a little bit small. He's 5'8". I think he's 205. Okay, that's not great. He's 24 years old. How much better is he going to get at this stuff? He's a bit of an older prospect. And all of that being said, I just keep coming back to the, J.K. Dobbins, to me, I just keep thinking of like the Thanos Avengers scene where Thanos snaps his fingers and says, I'm inevitable. Well, I mean, J.K. Dobbins, it's a similar situation, but instead of snapping his fingers, he's grabbing at a leg because he's got a soft tissue injury. Like that is going to happen every single season with him. It's unfortunate, but like you said, we have to bake that in. So don't be surprised if early in the season, this is Dobbins even potentially getting more work than Harvey. And at that point, I will be screaming from the rooftops to go trade for Harvey, because in the back half of the season, when that injury happens, Harvey's going to be that guy that you want and the guy potentially leading you to the fantasy playoffs.
Early season schedule for the Broncos. Look, I know this is faulty analysis because we don't know how defenses are going to be from one year to another. It's very, very inconsistent. But week 1, Tennessee Titans. Week 2, Indianapolis Colts. Week 3, Chargers. Nice little revenge spot there for J.K. Dobbins. Week 4, Cincinnati Bengals on ESPN on Monday night. I mean, that's a pretty nice opening schedule if J.K. Dobbins does get that veteran deference to really like take off there. So I think if you're trying to, which I don't think this is a great year in my opinion, to like punt off the running back position or do any kind of like true zero RB stuff. But I think if you are going to, Dobbins, from a fallout perspective, if it goes wrong for Harvey in camp and he's just the clear starting back, that might be a nice schedule for him, because I don't know where you are with the Broncos, Boone, but they were 11th in points per game last year. I think they're actually, I don't see a lot of scenarios where this ends up being like a bad offense. I think that Bo Nix can improve in his second season and was really good in his first year, and adding like Pat Bryant and Evan Ingram to the pass catching group here, along with Devon Vele and some of the kind of gadgety stuff that Marvin Mims did for them last year, and of course, Cortland Sutton. That's like it's not a great group of pass catchers, but it's a really interesting group of pass catchers, and I do think is going to make this offense better in Sean Payton's third season on the job.
Yeah, this is an offense that I want to invest in. I think another area that we could poke a hole would be, does Bo Nix have somewhat of a sophomore slump now that defensive coordinators get a full off season? But yeah, I would counter that by saying Sean Payton does a great job finding, easy throws for him, finding things to, get his confidence up, get him into rhythm. So I think Sean Payton would be able to counter that as well. But that's another area where if all of a sudden Bo Nix takes a bit of a step back from what we saw as the season went along last year, maybe this offense could take a step back as a whole. But again, I'm not that worried about that happening.
Next guy up here, and this is a tricky conversation based on recent events, Quinshon Judkins, running back 25, 70th overall. It feels kind of stupid to ask, how can it go wrong? What gives us pause here, Boone, when the guy was literally arrested for a pretty bad sounding domestic violence incident? So that obviously, like, how can it go wrong? The guy's, suspended, or what, a lot of things can go wrong, obviously, with that. So almost putting that aside, though, which I don't want to just put it aside because it's serious, but looking at it just from like a football perspective, this is still like the lead running back for the Cleveland Browns. And when we're talking about how many points our team's going to score, I mean, I think the Browns would be everybody's favorite to be the 32nd scoring offense this year. So honestly, even before, this incident went down, he was arrested. I think it was already like, yeah, there's some holes in the outlook here for Quinshon Judkins.
Yeah, for sure. And I do want to address that a little bit. I know we hate that we have to talk about this stuff. We hate that this stuff happens around the NFL and happens in the world in general. I would recommend, and I'm sure you already do, but I'd recommend everybody listening follows Drew Davenport, the fantasy football lawyer. Yes. He does an excellent job breaking down legal situations. And he really brings like the nuance to it and the compassion to it that I think it needs, and, looks at it from everyone's perspective, not just from the fantasy football lens. Like I think too many people do online and just quickly think about what this means for their fantasy teams. And the thing I will mention with this is it's alleged right now. And the domestic violence situations, they can come with 6+ game suspensions. So that all would factor in here, but we have to see how this plays out. There's still a lot more to come. The NFL also could put him on the exempt list. When a situation happens like this and there's a lot of bad press coming from it, sometimes even before things get settled in court, they just go right ahead and they put a player on the exempt list. So all of that is potentially
one more thing too, Boone, not to interrupt you, but he hasn't even signed his rookie contract yet because he's a part of this, second round pick holdouts. So, I mean, he's not holding out because they're not in camp yet, but the second round, like guys who haven't signed their deals yet, he's the fourth pick in the second round. So the Texans gave Jaden Higgins a fully guaranteed contract. The Browns' other second round pick, Carson Schwessinger, who was taken ahead of Higgins, immediately got a fully guaranteed contract because you can't give the guy after and not give it to the guy before. Then there's Nicky Manwari, and then there's Quinshon Judkins. So we're having all this discussion about him, and he hasn't even signed yet, which I don't know if that's going to end up complicating it because there is this arrest, but just another piece of the puzzle here.
No, I think that's a good thing to add. So we'll sum that up by just saying we're not legal experts. We're not going to dive into that, but go give Drew Davenport a follow on social media.
Yeah.
He does videos, he does breakdowns, he writes it all out. Definitely keep up to date with things there because he does a really good job. And overall, yes, that adds so much uncertainty to Judkins' outlook as we switch it back to the fantasy lens. But if you're asking me what else can go wrong, I mean, you touched on some of it there, right? Like, this is the Browns. They have this questionable quarterback situation. And, people say if you have two quarterbacks, you don't have one. Well, they have four quarterbacks, and I don't think they know who they're going to start this year. I think there's probably a good chance we're going to see two or three of these guys actually start games throughout the season. And that's probably not a good thing. They're just going to hope that somebody gets hot. But if they don't, we're going to see them cycle through. Maybe this guy, maybe this guy, maybe this time. And I'm not really sure that any of them are going to work out for this offense. So overall, a running back with, some uncertainty around him off the field. And now he's going to a team with some uncertainty on the field. It's not a great outlook. There's a lot of things adding up here. I think even before this, there was a good chance that we were going to see another back involved, and it was probably going to be Dylan Sampson, the other rookie that they took there. They also have Jerome Ford, who got a lot of run last year with Nick Chubb out. I think somebody else was going to be involved regardless. Now you look at it and you go, okay, well, if Judkins misses time, if Judkins, isn't that guy, if he doesn't sign his contract, all of these things, then you probably look at a committee with Sampson and with Ford. And again, with the state of this offense, even though, Kevin Stefanski has a pretty good run game there and they build it around play action, I still don't really see this working out well. So talent-wise, Judkins is a very good player. But overall, with so many things stacking up, I've really just stayed away from him. And not to spoil anything, because we did a mock draft recently that we're going to do some analysis on coming up, Matt. And I think Judkins went in like the 9th round as I want to say the RB 38 or 39. That's just to show you how far he's kind of fallen with all this news out there. So people in general seem to be shying away. I also would be shying away. I think this is just an unfortunate situation all around.
Yeah, one of the two hosts on the show actually ended up taking him in Scott Fishbowl 2 days before the news broke about the domestic violence arrest, because he was just at a point where he had fallen enough. And I was like, all right, well, I think it's actually a good spot, even if, again, I have huge questions about the Browns. But he's somebody that in traditional leagues, because they're, Scott Fishbowl, weird scoring and stuff like that. I was trying to just kind of put together a running back room that I was decently happy about. Certainly not happy about it now. He's a guy I haven't really been all that gravitated towards, because you mentioned Dylan Sampson and Jerome Ford are going, I think there's a little bit of a hedge here by fantasy drafters, going running back 55 and 56, literally back to back. And if one of those guys is involved, that would be a problem. If both of those guys are involved, again, on a team that probably is going to be bottom 3 in scoring. And, I'm interested in some of these Browns pass catchers, but I don't think all of them can work out in Jerry Jeudy, David Njoku, and Cedric Tillman, who I like taking as a late round flyer. Somebody's not going to work out there in terms of where they're going. Certainly, the running backs are even more in danger with just the overall, touchdown ceiling of the 2025 Cleveland Browns being very, very low. Last running back we're going to break down in depth here is Kaleb Johnson, who is going right at, this is kind of a rookie running back run here. Kaleb Johnson is running back 26, 69th overall. How can it go wrong, and what gives us pause looking at Kaleb Johnson's outlook as a rookie?
I mean, this one is obvious. I mean, Jaylen Warren just stepping up. He's been with the Steelers for a while now. Could he just take charge in that backfield? He's a pretty explosive player. He can handle the pass catching. I think regardless of what happens with Kaleb Johnson, Warren's going to be involved as a pass catcher, and Kaleb Johnson probably more that early down guy. He steps into that Najee Harris role. And the way that they've talked about him, to me, it seems pretty seamless that he's just going to take over that kind of role. Warren will continue to do Warren things, maybe get a little bit more work, but it's going to end up being some sort of split backfield. But there's certainly a scenario where you see Warren take on a little bit more and a little bit more. And, Johnson makes a couple rookie mistakes and they don't use him as much. And things potentially could go south for him there. So that's the obvious one. I don't have it ranked that way. I'm not projecting it that way, but that's, there's a very clear path to that potentially happening this season.
Yeah. Najee Harris, back-to-back years, running back 20, running back 21. So even if he just holds down that role, I mean, obviously Jalen Warren was a little bit banged up last year. I think that can still work out, even if Warren is kind of nipping at his heels. And it's worth noting that I'm interested to hear how you feel about the Steelers offense. I obviously am skeptical about how this all comes together under Aaron Rodgers, but they got, I'm not going to call it bad, but they certainly did not get great quarterback play last year from Russell Wilson and obviously Justin Fields to start. And they were still they weren't a good offense, but they were 16th in terms of points scored per game. How much do we really think they can go? Can they go up higher than that, or is the floor lower with Rodgers at quarterback this year?
I don't know if it's lower. I think it's probably pretty similar. I didn't want to just jump into the Aaron Rodgers, Arthur Smith thing. I sort of gave us a little appetizer there before we got into that.
Yeah.
But, and I will say too, I think Arthur Smith gets a lot of flack. I think some of those seasons he didn't have a quarterback. You go back to the Falcons days and, you're starting Desmond Ridder and you got to do some wacky things to try to generate offense. So I don't fault him for some of the strange things that he's done over the years, but now we have this Arthur Smith and Aaron Rodgers combination. Does anyone think this is going to work out? It seems like you have strong personalities. It seems like Rodgers is going to want to run it his way. It seems like it's just a ticking time bomb to me, and that makes me concerned. And I have a ton of respect for Mike Tomlin. I think he is a fantastic coach. I think he's a fantastic leader. I recommend that any coach out there, really any manager out there, go watch some of his interviews when he talks about coaching, and he actually talks about how it's the job of a coach to lift up the players and to treat them all differently and figure out, what buttons you have to push. It's all very, very smart. I wish everyone, followed that and did those things. So a ton of respect for him. And yet I don't even know that he's going to be able to contain this, because Rodgers just seems like he has carried this dark cloud over him wherever he's gone in the last few seasons. And I feel like now, even in Pittsburgh, a great town. I mean, that stadium's beautiful. I went there a couple of years ago on a trip. Stadium's beautiful. The area by the waterfront, it's so nice there. And all I'm picturing is Rodgers rolls into town and now it is clouded over and there are bad times coming at some point this season. That's literally how I'm viewing it. And that makes me a little bit worried about everybody in this offense. And honestly, I've taken shots on Kaleb Johnson. I certainly think that he can step into that Najee role. Talked about it earlier, right? Najee, even though he wasn't the most exciting back, over 1,200 scrimmage yards at 4 straight seasons. There is a role there for a guy to be mostly that early down guy and to come through for fantasy and be a low end RB2, high end RB3, kind of in that range. But man, I have been staying away from this Steelers offense because I don't think it's going to be a fun hang. I don't think I'm going to really want to watch many Steelers games this year. And it's all for this very reason, because the Rodgers situation and what I think is going to be an inevitable blow up between him and Arthur Smith and the way this offense is run.
If you had to go out and forget the personalities of it all, which is tough with these two people I'm about to bring up here. If you had to go out and win a game on Sunday, would you rather have at quarterback this version of Aaron Rodgers or this version of Russell Wilson?
I'm still going to go Rodgers. I know where you're leading me there, but I would still go Rodgers because I think in a one-game setting, yes, I think Rodgers, even at his age and even with what we've seen in recent years, we saw it down the stretch last year. If he dials in, he can still give you slightly above average quarterback play, or at least average quarterback play. I would rather that. I think and that's why DK Metcalf could end up being his new Devontae Adams. He could get peppered with targets. there's not a lot of other guys that are that interesting in the receiving core there, especially now that we have the 2 tight ends competing for that job. So, I just, Metcalf, I guess I would be a little bit interested in, but overall, I just think this is one that I want to stay away from. I don't want the headaches during the season, Matt. I don't want to have to watch some of these games and be pulling my hair out and going, how did I not see that? After what happened with the Jets and all the excitement that they had, and then watching the different ways that Rodgers kind of dragged them down with him. And it's not all his fault. Of course, there were other people involved, but I do think that his personality now
people he brought with him,
is a problem.
By the way.
Very true. Yeah. I'm overall, I'm worried about the Steelers offense, and to bring it back to Kaleb Johnson, that's an area where if the Rodgers thing has problems, if him and Arthur Smith are in the media weekly taking shots at each other, do we see the Steelers offense even take a bit of a step back, even though I think it's probably going to be more of the same of what we've seen in past years, which hasn't been great, but at least the running backs have been fairly productive. That's kind of where I stand with it. And I know I'm not throwing out, it's one of the rare times when I'm not throwing out a lot of stats here. It's just, this is genuinely how I feel about the situation in Pittsburgh. And I want people to know that I'm staying away from this one in most spots.
I mean, hard to argue with literally anything you just said there. It's not a good vibe. And I mean, should we throw these depth charts up on YouTube if you're watching there? For the audio folks, you're just gonna have to bear with me here. Like, honestly, it might look better. Like, for just the Steelers, we should change it to 13 personnel. Like, we should only have Metcalf on the field and have Jonnu Smith, Pat Freiermuth, and friggin' Darnell Washington. Like, we should have that. We should not be showing Robert Woods on this screen. But like, that's where this team is. It's like a goofy put together personnel group. I'm with you that I don't have a lot of faith here. I actually think this could be the bottom out year for the Steelers because Rodgers is another year older. He's a very particular player. And even like I don't think Russell Wilson was all that good of a fit in what Arthur Smith wants to do, because he doesn't want to attack over the middle. He doesn't want to get under center and like do these play action shot concepts that Arthur Smith's offense wants to do and has been really good with. And Rodgers, like his accuracy over the middle, I mean, I cannot tell you, man, charting Garrett Wilson for reception perception, how many just dig routes are just behind him. And like, that should be the basis of this offense with DK Metcalf, is getting under center and ripping it over the middle. But Rodgers, like, because he doesn't want to get hit right now, I think this offensive line is going to be pretty good if Troy Fautanu comes back healthy and Broderick Jones moving back to his natural position at left tackle, which I do think is a little bit of like hopium there. But if that works out, like, this offensive line could be very good and protect Rodgers well. But if that doesn't happen, I think there's so many paths to this not working out in Pittsburgh. And shoot, the ways that it could work, I think we're stretching it. So I think that really for Kaleb Johnson, the bottom falls out and the Steelers are, like a pretty bad offense. And he's only the early down back because Jaylen Warren is like too good to really be denied here. So I actually think that the ways that this can go wrong for him are very obvious. And I think he did a good job of painting those outcomes there. Before we throw to break, I'm just going to throw this group of day 3 running back picks that gamers are counting on to be relevant in some way. Again, this is ADP order. We've got Cam Scatterboo of the New York Giants, running back 34, 103rd overall pick right now. Jaden Blue of the Dallas Cowboys, running back 42, 129th overall. Bajal Tutin, running back 44, 133rd overall. Despite what happened with Bucky Irving last year, Boone, we don't typically just see day 3 running backs come in and be RB1s in fantasy football. This group is going rather high for day 3 backs that have other names ahead of them on the depth chart. Is there one guy that you're prioritizing of this group and really wanting to take? And is there one that like you just don't really see it for their year 1 outlook?
Well, let's start with the don't really see it. It's actually Jaden Blue. And it's just, I know the Cowboys have such a wide open backfield and anybody could take it. And I'm not that confident in Javonte Williams. I'm not that confident in Miles Sanders or either of those guys really running away with that job. But I think it's just going to be a mess all year long. I don't think anyone's going to run away with it. And I think the Cowboys are going to be throwing a ton. Producer Colin's going to be mad at me for bringing this up about his Cowboys. But I do think that team is going to rely on the passing attack. I think the team is going to rely on the passing attack. I want to see Dak Prescott air it out with CeeDee Lamb and with George Pickens and with Jake Ferguson. And I think they know that's what they're going to have to do. That has to be it, right? Like, why are they not investing in the running back position at all? And I don't mean going out and spending a high draft pick. I don't mean going out and giving somebody a big contract. It's like they've gone too far the other way with it, where they're just not paying attention to running backs at all. They're signing these guys to really, really cheap deals. And, you know, I don't think they're going to get lucky a second straight year and end up with what they had last year in Rico Dowdle, who ended up being a pretty productive back for them. I just don't think they have that guy this season. So I think it's going to be a messy committee. That's one. That's why I'm staying away from him. And that's not even one that I have to like stretch. I actually just straight up believe that. So I have Blue a little bit lower than most people. The other two, it's pretty close. I have them side by side in my rookie dynasty rankings. I've moved Scatterboo up above him just because I do think there's a better shot that he could potentially take that job in New York and run away with it and be, again, in a committee, but be the lead guy in a committee. Because I think Tyron Tracy Jr. is a good back. I think he fared really well last year. But again, like you mentioned, how many of these day three backs actually end up stepping up? We always remember the names that do, but there are so many guys that don't. And I know people love their big white running backs like Cam Scatterboo. They think, okay, he's going to be the next Mike Allstott out there. That's not necessarily going to be the case,
Peyton
right?
Hillis,
He'll
baby.
probably be exactly. He's going to be the early down guy potentially, or get worked in there. But I still think that Tyron Tracy Jr. is going to continue to be the lead back. I think he's going to be the more valuable one for fantasy. It will be close, though. It's going to be a committee. And then if you want to poke holes in it, Devin Singletary's still there, and we know that Daboll loves him.
True.
So could this be a three-man backfield, which in that scenario, now you start to get scared about any of them. Tootin is the one that it was very easy to get excited when we all saw the quotes of their new GM, James Gladstone, and he talked about how he brought up Tootin as an example in his interview for the job. And you went, okay, this guy was talking about him in the interview for the job. Wow, they really must want to feature this guy. And then, you know, really bad luck that I think he fumbled on like his first touch in OTAs. And we haven't heard that much buzz. You want to hear a little bit of a drumbeat about one of these rookie backs from OTAs and leading into training camp. And then maybe they can do something. Really, what we've heard is that Travis Etienne is playing pretty well, and that, you know, maybe he's still going to be the guy, and we'll see other players worked in. There's really four backs that are worth consideration in this backfield too. It's not just Etienne, Tank Bigsby. We have Tootin there as well. And then also we have LaQuint Allen Jr., who was a prospect that I liked, a deeper prospect for sure. But he was a guy that got a little bit of buzz in OTAs and that they talked about as a potential pass catching weapon, that he could be involved. So I'm not too sure how this is going to work out. I will draft those two where they're going in Tootin and Scatterboo, but I don't necessarily have a ton of confidence that either is going to end up being like this league winner, you know, breakout guy this season. I'm not sure that it's going to happen, even though we saw it happen before with Liam Cohen, you know, and that, you know, Giants backfield seems fairly wide open, like it's for the taking if Scatterboo could step in. I don't really feel great about any of these guys at the moment.
I think that you're right to say that Cam Scatterboo like is more likely to win the Giants job than Bajal Tootin is to win the Jaguars job. But the reason I think I'd still rather take Tootin over Scatterboo is that if Tootin wins the Jaguars job, it's going to matter a lot more than Scatterboo winning the Giants job, if that makes sense. Because like, I think that the Giants they'll probably be a better offense with Russell Wilson, who we just talked about earlier, starting the season, but then likely giving way to Jackson Dart. They were still 31st in points per game last year, and not that much has changed. They're just basically saying, our problem last year was Daniel Jones. I'm not sure that was their only problem, even if that was a problem. So I think that, again, they could maybe be 28th in scoring. And like you said, not only is Tyron Tracy going to be involved, Devin Singletary, who I actually think could end up being on this Cowboys roster, to get back to Jaden Blue in a second. Like, I think he could get, if he gets cut by this team, yeah, he could end up being like the starting running back for the Cowboys or something like that. But if he's on the roster, again, we're talking about a three-way split on a bad offense. No thanks. I think the Jaguars are going to be a pretty good, at least average offense. But I think that it's much more likely that Etienne or Tank Bigsby starts over Bajal Tootin, and just like the guy never sees the field as a fourth round pick, if that makes sense. I agree with you that most likely Jaden Blue is not going to really matter in fantasy, but I like taking him in the double digit rounds. I think I took him in the mock draft that we did. because I'm very high on the Cowboys offense. And again, in best ball leagues, I don't want to take him because we're at this like 129th overall ADP, because if you take him, you could conceivably just be getting zeros in your lineup over and over again. But in managed leagues, redraft leagues, okay, we get to September and he's buried behind Javonte Williams and Miles Sanders. I'll just cut him. Who cares? And realistically, though, I do think he could be involved in the pass game. And like you said, I think this team could be top 5 in pass attempts this year. And I think that if a running back is going to matter in that offense among these three guys, like Jaden Blue could be effective as a pass catcher. So I do like taking Blue, even though I think you're most likely right that he's not going to matter this year.
And there's a spot that you're going to be willing to take everyone, because even though I said all of that about the Cowboys backfield, I took Javonte Williams in that mock draft. It came at a price that I was totally fine with later in the draft and later than he normally goes. And I was like, all right, I could use some running back help. Let's take a shot on that at that point. I'm hoping, though, what you said about Singletary, that could potentially end up being true, because I have a lot of Singletary shares in deep dynasty rosters where he's just sitting on my bench hoping to find a new home where he could get a starting job, and he's done it before. So let's see that happen again. Let's put that out in the universe. Let's get Singletary on another team.
Well, I'm probably wrong, even though I do keep hearing from Cowboys people like, oh, the starting running back is not on the roster right now. So we'll see. Maybe we're back here in August discussing Devin Singletary or somebody else as the Cowboys RB1, which would really clear things up, because I'm sure you did not enjoy clicking Javonte Williams' name, but it's just, it's hopefully we enjoy clicking the Cowboys RB1 maybe a little bit more than you did there. We're going to take our last break. We come back. We're going to quickly rank these top 6 guys in Dynasty going forward right after this. All right, we are back. Justin, we're going to quickly rank these guys for Dynasty here. I think we'll be in agreement that Ashton Jeanty's number 1. Omarion Hampton, based on what you said earlier, I'm guessing is going to be your number 2. How do we order the rest of these guys between Henderson, Harvey, Judkins, Johnson? And hey, if you want to throw any of those day 3 guys that we mentioned earlier in here, you're clearly, again, I say this with love, you are obviously a sick freak in terms of some of these deeper names. You want to throw some of those guys in there? The floor is yours, buddy.
You didn't even have to give me permission. I was going to do that anyway. I got a long list of guys that we're going to mention here. Don't worry. So we're going to start. The third running back is TreVeyon Henderson. And a lot of this is going to go in the order that we just talked about it for me. And Henderson's pretty straightforward, right? I love the game-breaking speed. I love the pass-catching ability. And like I said earlier, I think he is going to thrive as a pass catcher in that offense. That's where he's going to make his hay. We're not expecting him to come out and be some sort of workhorse and put up double-digit touchdowns. A huge touchdown total would be an absolute bonus for him. I'm expecting a lot of catches and that receiving role there. Next, and we have to put a huge asterisk next to this one, it is still Quinshon Judkins, because Judkins, talent-wise, is the next best running back. So in terms of, and we're looking at this from a dynasty lens, right? So this is for a full career. If all of this sorts itself out, if he gets back on the field eventually, he is the guy with the talent who would be my number 2 back in this. Although personally right now, probably just taking him off my draft board entirely and not drafting him anywhere, but we have to mention him here. We can't just wipe him aside. And so huge asterisks on that one. Judkins would be 4th there. Then RJ Harvey, the productive backfield. They're just looking for that guy to come in and really take it over. A really good O-line there. I think, like we talked about, he might have a slower start, but eventually he will take over and he's going to be a pretty good back for fantasy. Kaleb Johnson, I just think he's a great value compared to the other running backs above him that we just talked about. You have to pay a pretty big price for those other guys. I've gotten Kaleb Johnson in rookie dynasty drafts in the end of the first round. I find that he falls. More than happy to take him there. And I could see him being a productive player despite all the things we said about him. Career-wise, could come in. Not going to be the guy that's going to win you your league, but could come in. And the spots I've taken him, I'm looking at him as like an RB3 or a flex on my teams. You put him in that slot. You hope that he has a season where he puts up a big touchdown total. So I really like him there. Then there's a big gap before we get to the next guys. And the next guy for me, like we said, it's 2 together. It's Scattaboo and it's Tootin. Scattaboo, I think there's a chance he could take that job. I don't necessarily think that's going to happen. I think it's going to end up being a committee, which is why there's that big gap between him and the guys above him. And then Tootin, I agree with everything you said. And when I first put out my rookie rankings, I had Tootin above Scatterboo. I changed it as time has gone on here, as some of the quotes have trickled out, and as we just haven't heard that drumbeat about Tootin. But he is such an explosive player. That's a backfield, again, another one that's kind of looking for that guy to step up. Obviously, Liam Cohen found it in Bucky Irving last year. Can Tootin be that guy? Can he do it 2 seasons in a row and pluck somebody from late and turn them into a fantasy star? I hope so. I don't necessarily know that that's going to happen, and he's still got a lot to prove, of course, there. And then you would think, okay, we talked about Jaden Blue. It's not Jaden Blue for me next. It's actually Jarquez Hunter on the Rams, and he's a guy who is very explosive. He brings something that I think the other backs in that Rams backfield don't. And this, we have to say, Kyren Williams, they're talking about an extension for him. Kyren Williams, just annually underrated by the fantasy community. He's going to continue to put up good numbers. He's so productive. Sean McVay running backs are very productive. But if there's a guy that's going to get in there and start to take away stuff from him, or maybe depending what we see in training camp, maybe they don't give Kyren Williams the extension because they see Hunter out there and what he can do in that offense and how explosive he is. I think he's somebody that I want to have on a lot of teams just in case he ends up being more of a long-term option for the Rams. So I will say that, but again, Kyren Williams, this is not that this is going to happen immediately. This is not that he's going to overtake Kyren Williams right away. It's just we're bringing that up because the Rams could use that back that has that game-breaking ability, and Kyren Williams is more just thriving in that system with the volume he's getting and the opportunities. So Hunter, then we go to Jaden Blue. Like I said, not sure he's ever going to be the lead back, but certainly, intriguing this year. Could he end up carving out a role? I think he will. I think it's just going to be a committee there, though, and that's why I'm not that excited about the Cowboys' backfield. After that, we're going to go to Dylan Sampson, and we talked about him. Well, I guess we could put an asterisk next to his name as well, because depending what happens with Judkins, Sampson could really vault up this list a few spots, maybe even get up into that Scatterboo Tootin area if we find out that Judkins is going to miss time, or if his career is completely derailed because of the off-field stuff. And again, allegedly, but if that happens, Sampson turns into a very interesting fantasy pick. Tough landing spot though for him right now behind a more talented back and in the Browns offense for obvious reasons. Then I'm going to go to Brashard Smith on the Chiefs. And now we're getting into an area where I don't think he's ever going to be the lead back, but it really sounds like Andy Reid has a plan for him, wants to use him in the passing game. And maybe best case scenario for him could be like a Jerick McKinnon type. So we could see Brashard Smith give us some value this year. If it does happen, it's not going to be as an RB1 or probably even an RB2. It's going to be more of a flex play. But where you get him, if he returns flex value this year, that is going to be great. And then I'll stop there. But trust me, I have another like 12 names on the list that I am going to mention. But I'll let you jump in first. So I'll catch a breath.
No, just as you were talking and ranking these guys, number one, I think we're pretty close here. I might just at this point put RJ Harvey ahead of Quinshon Judkins just because I have a lot more faith in what's going on in Denver overall. And obviously with the off-field stuff, I think that's just, I don't know. And Henderson is a guy that, I was like, I'm kind of like in my head toying. Do I like RJ Harvey? Do I like TreVeyon Henderson a little bit more? But I think Henderson was a better prospect. And ultimately, like as much as I have some concerns about New England and his role in year one, I think from a dynasty perspective, I really like where he's going. So I'm not going to argue too much there. But my big takeaway, honestly, from looking at your list, and if you want to throw some more names out after I yak here for a second, I would love to hear them, because I think my two big takeaways, looking at your rankings here and just our discussion overall, I actually do think on paper this group might be a little bit overhyped. Like I might end up being not as good as maybe we think, just because of some of these scenarios that these guys landed in. I mean, think about a guy like Kaleb Johnson for a second, who I really think is a good back, and I think is a wonderful fit in Arthur Smith's run game. But what if our bottom out scenario happens here for Pittsburgh this year? And like Mike Tomlin actually does move. Like I think, by the way, if I'm Mike Tomlin, I might want to move on at this point from Pittsburgh and just start over somewhere else. Like go the Andy Reid route, right? Like it wore out in Philly. working out pretty good in Kansas City. I think there's a chance that it might happen for Tomlin that way. Well, guess what? Arthur Smith's not coming back as the offensive coordinator. Who's to say the next running back, next offensive coordinator has a run game system that's so outside zone heavy, which fits Kaleb Johnson. So he might go the way of one of these guys that just never ends up hitting a ceiling. All these guys like Scadaboo, Tootin, whatever, they might never end up happening. So I do think, though, and this is my second point and why I want to hear some more of your names, is that when I'm looking back at that 2017 class, the strength of it, it's actually pretty similar from a draft capital standpoint, right? Like there's a guy, 2 first-round picks, Fournette, McCaffrey. There's Dalvin Cook, Joe Mixon in the second round. Then there's Kamara, Kareem Hunt, James Conner in the third round. Like that's from a draft capital standpoint, pretty similar to this group. But really where this group goes to the next level is like we got Jamal Williams in the 4th round, who led the league in touchdowns one year. Aaron Jones in the 5th round, who's obviously still a starting running back in the NFL. Like I mentioned at the very beginning of this, Chris Carson in the 7th round. So really, if this class is not going to be overhyped, even Marlon Mack was the 4th round pick and was really good before he tore his Achilles. If this class is going to not be overhyped, I think it's going to take one of these, seemingly random, very sleeperish names that you're throwing out here to actually hit here, Boone.
All right, so let's do it then. So let's go. And I will say, when you get to the late 3rd round into the 4th round of your rookie dynasty draft, I'm just loading up on these guys because along the lines of what you were saying there, the depth of this class might end up being its strength, right? Like there's a couple guys at the top we love, but man, there are so many guys down here that you could see a path to them ending up with roles and even potentially lead back roles, depending what happens, right? So I will start it in order for me. It's Ollie Gordon on the Dolphins. And I know right now, Devon Achane is the lead guy there. They're talking up Jalen Wright, that he's going to have a bigger second year and be more involved. And we've seen that offense have 2 productive backs at the same time when Raheem Mostert was a little younger and he was sharing the backfield with Achane. But you look at this, and Gordon is a bigger body. Gordon is a guy that had a ton of success in college, but then had kind of a down year before he left college. And I think people forget just what the highs were for him. And if he can get back to that in the pros, this guy's a very talented running back. Then we go to Kyle Monangai on the Bears, and the Bears backfield. They didn't do anything. We thought that they were going to go out and get someone. All the excitement, all the moves that they made with Ben Johnson getting there and with the offensive line and just rebuilding the interior of the offensive line. And now they're going into the season with DeAndre Swift again, with Roschon Johnson, who I think is a pretty intriguing pick in fantasy. And then with Kyle Monangai, who is way further down the list, is somebody you could get in the late rounds of your redraft leagues, or a guy that I would be targeting in like the 4th round of my rookie dynasty drafts, because he's somebody that could potentially end up being that other option. I don't think he's going to end up being the lead back necessarily, but a guy that could get into a Bears backfield that everything around them is going to get much better. So can there be a running back there that steps up? Next is DJ Giddens. This one is just an injury guy, like injury replacement type. If something happens to Jonathan Taylor with the Colts, Giddens could potentially step up there. Taj Brooks with the Bengals. Again, all these guys are very, very close together. I'm happy to get any one of them. Really like Taj Brooks as somebody that could potentially take on like the Zach Moss role. Zach Moss is back and he is going to try to get out there this year. But will the team eventually move on from him? It'll probably depend what Brooks can do. So Brooks could be that second back in the backfield with Chase Brown there. Trevor Etienne with the Panthers. Really buried on that depth chart because they have Chuba Hubbard, because they have Rico Dowdle. But those guys are like, they had good seasons last year for sure, but I don't think we look at them in the same light that we look at some of the other established backs around the league. So I could see a path where something opens up and all of a sudden you have the rookie getting more work there. Now, here's one that I love, and this is a deeper name. I think people are starting to realize it now. Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt on the Commanders. Now, that Commanders backfield, I know Austin Eckler is your guy. He's getting up there, though. It's later in his career. Could we potentially see him start to, cede some touches and give up that pass catching role to a guy like Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, who could be that explosive option in the backfield there for the Commanders, could really step up and play alongside of Brian Robinson, or eventually maybe he could take a bigger role in that backfield. I think I would love to see that for the Commanders offense. Probably not going to happen this year, would require some injuries, but still somebody that I've been drafting in a lot of places. And then I'm just going to rattle a bunch off here. Jordan James. Could he be the number 3 back for the 49ers? For years, we've been looking at the depth backs for the 49ers in that Kyle Shanahan system. I think Jordan James could be that guy that you grab late and could turn into something, even though he would be behind CMC and behind Isaac Orendo. A Devin Neal with the Saints. LaQuint Allen Jr. with the Jags, potentially in a pass-catching role. Woody Marks, I don't think people are talking about him as much just because the Texans assigned Nick Chubb, but he's somebody that could eventually be the number 2 back for the Texans. And then Damian Martinez I liked more as a prospect, ended up with the Seahawks, really buried on that depth chart. Phil Maffa on the Cowboys. If you're looking at Cowboys backs, who knows? Anybody could end up getting a chance this year. Maybe Phil Maffa could be that guy. Raheem Sanders, we're going down. Raheem Sanders, who we talked about. I only have a couple more. Clell Mullins on the Titans and Marcus Yarns on the Saints. The Saints, another backfield where we don't really know who's going to be number 2 there, right? So could Devin Neal or Marcus Yarns be that guy? I know they brought in Cam Akers recently. That probably tells you they're not that excited about what the rookies are doing in practice, but that's where we stand. I cut the list off there. That was the list that I had coming into this. I wanted to mention all those guys. And I'm telling you, when you get to like the 4th, 5th round, if you have one in your rookie drafts, load up on these names. Don't worry about the receivers. Don't worry about quarterbacks. There's some tight ends you might want to look at, but overall, get as many of these running backs as you possibly can.
Oh, Boone, gotta love you, man. You rattled off 27 names here. And I mean, I'm like, hey, we gotta get a sleeper from this group somewhere. They're in there. Someone's in there in the 27 names. I do think the 2 I'll highlight that I think are, I actually might have a little higher than you is 1, Devin Neal. I actually think I'd have him ahead of like maybe even Rashard Smith is really interesting because he landed with the Kansas City Chiefs. I think that was the guy that Jordan Reed, when we had him on the show, talked about as like his guy in this running back class. So definitely someone to pay attention to there. But I really think Devin Neal was an underrated prospect who fell to the 6th round because, he is a tough running back. He's a big time running back class, but there's opportunity there for him. We really need to see the Devin Neal projected fantasy stats here for Devin Neal. I think he's gonna be the 2nd running back though. I think he beats out Kendre Miller. I know Kendre Miller is like a fantasy Twitter favorite, but certainly somebody to keep an eye on there. And Damian Martinez, man, I think there was some off-field stuff, things like that. Maybe, and I mean off-field like maturity type things that maybe he didn't do so well in the interviews. That's why he got pushed out of the 7th round. But I really think he was a good back, and that system there in Seattle does fit him. So a couple names to note there, but yeah, 27 names. I'll just read them off real quick for the people. Ashton Jeanty, number 1, Omarion Hampton, TreVeyon Henderson, Quinshon Judkins, RJ Harvey, Kaleb Johnson, Cam Scatteraboo, Basil Tootin, Jarquez Hunter, Jaden Blue, Dylan Sampson, Rashard Smith, Ollie Gordon, Kyle Monungai, DJ Giddens, Taj Brooks, Trevor Etienne, Ja'Cory Kwaski Merritt, Jordan James, Devin Neal, LaQuint Allen Jr., Woody Marks, Damian Martinez, Phil Maffa, then we got Sanders, Mullins, and Yarns. Those are Justin Boone's 27 ranked running backs among the rookies for Dynasty this year.
27, also my favorite number. Did not realize it was going to be 27. So there you go. There's some synergy there that works out perfectly. And I will say, I agree with you on Devin Neal. I had him much higher. I moved him down not based on the talent. Pre-draft, I had him actually quite high. I moved him down just based on the way things have kind of gone there. You see some things from practice where Kendre Miller looks like he's moving at a different speed than everyone else. So that looks kind of more interesting. Devin Neal really not standing out there. And then, like I said before, they bring in Cam Akers, and that makes me worried. Maybe it's just a veteran camp body, but it makes me a little bit worried that they saw what they saw from the rookies and they were like, we got to get somebody else in here to be the number 2 back, knowing that Kendre Miller has had so many injury issues and stuff. But I hope you're right about Devin Neal because I do really like him as a prospect.
What a show. Big show. I did not think we were going to go this long because I did not know that Justin Boone had 27 names locked and loaded, ready to go. I will never underestimate you again, my friend. Before we get out of here, gotta share the big news once again. I'm gonna hit you guys over the head with this over the course of the next few months and into the season, so just get ready for it. we have launched a new Yahoo Fantasy YouTube page to give you a one-stop shop for all your fantasy needs. Even bigger news, this podcast is going to go live every Sunday through Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific on the Yahoo Fantasy YouTube starting August 4th. So be sure to subscribe to the page now and get ready for this fantasy draft season. That is going to do it for us today and our off-season coverage on this podcast. Where the hell did the off-season go? Boone, shout out to you for an incredible episode. Really enjoyed this discussion. You're going to be back on Tuesday, though, as we officially kick off our draft season coverage with that mock draft. Very much looking forward to it. I don't know if you're going to be able to top this performance with those 27 names, but I'm looking forward to that show, man.
We'll see what we can do. I know there's one name that last week I told people not to draft, and I drafted him in that one. So I'll have to explain why, but we'll save that for next week.
We absolutely will. Can't wait to break that down. Tons of people in the industry as well. So it's going to be a great show. You don't want to miss that. But until then, we are out.